The Vanishing Hitchhikers. One of the most entertaining types of ghost stories is that of the phantom or vanishing hitchhiker. It's also one of the most chilling because, if true, they bring ghosts in very close contact with mortals. Perhaps more disconcerting still, the stories describe the ghosts as looking, acting, and sounding like living people, even physically interacting with the unsuspecting drivers who pick them up. The basic story usually goes something like this. A tired driver traveling at night picks up a strange hitchhiker, drops him or her off at some destination, and then somehow later finds out that the hitchhiker had in fact died months or years earlier, often on that very same date. Like most ghost stories, tales of phantom hitchhikers are impossible to verify and are most often considered to be urban legends. There are many such stories, and it's up to you to determine whether or not you believe any of them. Here are just a few. The basketball player. A woman driving to her sister's house on a winter evening sees a boy of about 11 or 12 years of age hitchhiking on the side of the road. She stops for him. He gets into the front seat next to her, and they chat as they drive down the highway. The boy says he's a basketball player for a local school, and she sees that indeed he has the height and build of an athlete. She also notices that he is not wearing a jacket of any kind, despite the fact that it's winter. The boy seems to have no particular destination in mind, as he points to the side of the road and asks to be let out there. The woman is puzzled because she can see no houses or lights anywhere. Before she can pull over to the side of the road, however, the youth simply vanishes. She immediately stops the car, gets out and looks around, but the boy is nowhere to be seen. She later learns that the same vanishing hitchhiker was first picked up at the same spot 29 years earlier. The girl on the side of the road. A doctor, while driving home from a country club dance, picks up a young girl in a white dress. She climbs into the back seat of his car because the front seat is crowded with golf clubs and tells him an address to take her to. As he arrives at the address, he turns to speak to her, but she is gone. The curious doctor rings the doorbell of the address given to him by the mysterious girl. A gray-haired man answers the door and reveals that the girl was his daughter. She had died in a car accident exactly 2 years earlier. Resurrection Mary. The story of Resurrection Mary begins on a winter night when a young girl named Mary is killed in a car accident while on her way home from a dance. 5 years later, a taxi driver picks up a young girl in a white dress on the same street. She sits in the front seat and instructs him to drive north. After driving a short distance, she suddenly tells him to stop, and then simply vanishes from the taxi. The taxi is stopped in front of Resurrection Cemetery, where the girl is buried. According to an account many years later, a woman witnessed Mary locked inside the iron fence of the cemetery. Reportedly, the metal bars of the fence bore the imprints of her hands. The Smoking Ghost. On a dark winter night, a man stops for a stranger hitchhiking on the side of the road. The stranger is dressed in a military uniform, and after he gets into the car, asks if he can have a cigarette. The man gives him one, and a lighter with which to light it. With his peripheral vision, the driver sees the flash of the lighter, but then, on turning his head, is astonished to see that his passenger has vanished into thin air. Only the cigarette lighter remains on the seat. The grandmother. Two businessmen stop for a little old lady in a lavender dress walking along the side of the road in the middle of the night. She tells them she is going to see her daughter and granddaughter, and they offer to drive her to the next town. On the way, she proudly tells them all about her children and grandchildren, such as their names and where they live. After a while, the men become engrossed in their own business conversation, and when they reach their destination, the old woman is no longer in the back seat. Fearing the worst, the men retrace their route, but do not find the woman anywhere. Finally, recalling the daughter's name, they go to her house to report what they fear might have been a horrible accident. The men identify her from photos in the daughter's house. It turns out that the old woman was buried exactly 3 years ago that day.
The Bell Witch. In 1817, one of the most well-known hauntings in American history took place in the small town of Adams, Tennessee. In fact, it was so well-known that the story caught the attention of a future president of the United States. Known as the Bell Witch, the strange activity that caused fear in the small farming community has remained unexplained for nearly 200 years. It is the inspiration for many fictional ghost stories, including the film The Blair Witch Project. Although they both attracted a great deal of public interest, the facts of the Bell Witch story share little in common with those created for the Blair Witch Project. Because it really happened, the Bell Witch story is perhaps much more frightening. Like many stories, certain details of who or what the Bell Witch was vary from version to version. The prevailing account is that it was the ghost of a woman named Kate Batts, a mean old neighbor of John Bell. Batts believed Bell cheated her in a land purchase, and on her deathbed, she swore that she would haunt John Bell and his family. This version is published in 1933. Sure enough, tradition says, the Bells were tormented for years by the malicious spirit of old Kate Batts. John Bell and his favorite daughter Betsy were the principal targets. Toward the other members of the family, the witch was either indifferent or, as in the case of Mrs. Bell, friendly. No one ever saw her, but every visitor to the Bell home heard her all too well. Her voice, according to one person who heard it, spoke at a nerve-wracking pitch when displeased, while at other times it sang and spoke in low musical tones. The spirit of old Kate led John and Betsy Bell on a merry chase. She threw furniture and dishes at them. She pulled their noses, yanked their hair, poked needles into them. She yelled all night to keep them from sleeping and snatched food from their mouths at mealtimes. News of the Bell Witch spread quickly. When word of the haunting reached Nashville, one of its most famous citizens, General Andrew Jackson, decided to gather a group of friends and go to Adams to investigate. The future president wanted to come face to face with the phenomenon and either expose it as a hoax or send the spirit away. According to one account, Jackson and his men were traveling over a smooth section of road when suddenly the wagon stopped. The men pushed and pushed, but the wagon could not be moved. The wheels were even removed and inspected. Then came the sound of a voice from the bushes saying, "All right, General, let the wagon move on. I will see you tonight." The astonished men could not find the source of the voice. The horses then unexpectedly started walking on their own, and the wagon moved along again. Jackson indeed encountered the witch that night and left early the next morning, claiming he would rather fight the British than the Bell Witch. The haunting of the Bell House continued for several years, ending with the ghost's ultimate act of vengeance. In October 1820, John Bell suffered a stroke. In and out of bed for several weeks, his health never improved. The Tennessee State University in Nashville recounts this part of the story. On the morning of December 19th, he failed to awake at his regular time. When the family noticed he was sleeping unnaturally, they attempted to rouse him. They discovered Bell was in a stupor and couldn't be completely awakened. John Jr. went to the medicine cupboard to get his father's medicine and noticed it was gone, but a strange vial was in its place. No one claimed to have replaced the medicine with the vial. A doctor was summoned to the house. The witch began taunting that she had placed the vial in the medicine cabinet and given Bell a dose of its contents while he slept. The substance was tested on a cat and discovered to be highly poisonous. John Bell died on December 20th. Kate was quiet until after the funeral. However, after the grave was filled, the witch began singing loudly and joyously until all of John Bell's friends and family left his graveside. A few explanations of the Bell Witch phenomena have been offered over the years. One is that the haunting was a hoax created by Richard Powell, the school teacher of Betsy Bell, and Joshua Gardner, the boy with whom Betsy was in love. It seems Powell was deeply in love with Betsy and would do anything to destroy her relationship with Gardner. Through a variety of tricks, and with the help of several friends, it is believed that Powell created all of the ghostly effects to scare Gardner away. In fact, Gardner eventually did break up with Betsy and left the area. It has never been satisfactorily explained, however, how Powell achieved all the effects. But Powell did come out the winner. In the end, he married Betsy Bell.